Welcome to Field Notes, the infrastructure podcast. I'm your host, Abby Crawford, and today I am here with Mr. Jerry Cederlund. He is the SVP of Customer Supply and Fulfillment Operations at Calix. Jerry, how are you?
I'm well, thank you, Abby. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Pleasure.
So I just want to jump right in. Let's start with your background. Can you tell us just about how you got into supply chain operations?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and again, thanks for inviting me. This is an important topic. I spent nearly 4 decades in supply chain leadership positions. I've seen all types of operational disruptions, so I've had the opportunity to work with some amazing supply chain professionals, present company included, working through these disruptions. One of the key learnings that I have from all of this is that it's hard to predict events, what might happen, but what you usually can predict are the impacts of what might happen. So that's how I got into this and how I enjoy working in this field.
That's awesome. So what brought you to Calix?
Well, I really care about my team's impact on customers and on communities, and it became harder and harder to see how my impact and my team's impact, actually how it was impacting the customers. And as I rose higher in levels in the organizations before Calix, I started to feel like I wanted to find a company that was closer to my personal mission. And Calix's mission is very clear when it comes across in our credo, seeing our customers simplify, innovate, and grow their business. Ultimately, Calix helps our customers to build connections and enable innovation, one community at a time. And that's really the way we like to think about it. I can see how my team's actions contribute to this in a real way. Our customers facilitate improvements for the first responders, small business entrepreneurship, local high school sports teams, students facing educational barriers, things like that, and a host of other tangible benefits that I really can see every day. And I remember interviewing at Calix, and every interview was a discussion about purpose and culture, and nobody really asked much about my skills and achievements. It was all about whether I could fit in and be a part of this bigger purpose. And I loved it at the time, and I still love it every day today.
That's huge. That's awesome. Just knowing that what you're doing every day is making a difference is
Yeah.
huge. I can appreciate that. So you've had many roles in this industry. So far, what are the key lessons that you've learned throughout your years of experience?
Yeah, well, again, one of the key learnings for me is, understanding the root cause of things that happen. You know, we have events happening all the time, geopolitical events, tariff events, uh, coronavirus events. It's normal for the supply chain to be disrupted. So we do a lot of scenario planning, and I've learned that scenario planning is a very important part of how to manage risk and resilience. So we can't predict what might happen, but we can usually predict the impacts of what those things will be. So, for instance, we might keep an extra 6 months or 9 months of inventory on a specific set of components because they're in a geographically volatile region, whether that's geopolitics or natural disasters. So we can't predict either of those events, but we can predict what the impact might be, and so we'll protect and we'll do something to protect that impact, even though it might span several events. And I came out of working for Motorola, and then Aris, and then CommScope, and then Calix. And I've always worked in a way that you try to understand and approach problems in a like a Six Sigma format. A 599.999% error-free in performance in everything that we do, and look for the root cause, identify the problem, identify the cause, and permanently solve that problem. So it shapes the way I think about things today.
Very cool. Very interesting. So that kind of brings me into um, tariffs. How have recent tariffs impacted the telecom industry that you've seen?
Yeah, I think, first, I want to say that, I support the administration's intention to balance trade and to bring some level of manufacturing back to the United States and to North America in general, where, of course, that makes sense. I think a lot of the experts would say that we're moving towards a more regionalized supply chain, right? Especially when it comes to products that are related to national security and health, which of course telecom and fiber optics are, tightly related to both of those areas. A few of the facts, as of this recording, right? The top exporters of optical transmission equipment for telecom are really, by country of origin, are China, Vietnam, Malaysia, Mexico, Indonesia, a few others, a little bit in India starting to come up. A large part of the China exports are from Huawei and ZTE, which they're restricted from selling in the United States. So really, we're relying on those other countries mentioned. So on Liberation Day, April 2nd, the tariffs were levied on Vietnam, 46%, Malaysia was 24%, Indonesia was 32%, and fortunately, most fiber telecom and electronic equipment from Mexico is under USMCA, so it's not subject to these tariffs. And I personally think Claudia Sheinbaum is moving things in the right direction to make sure that USMCA continues under the current terms. And I think that will stick. And then there was a 90-day pause on all of the very high reciprocal tariffs while holding the 10% baseline in effect. And then Annex 2 was published, which exempts optical transmission equipment from reciprocal tariffs, including that baseline. We've seen the negotiation with the UK and with China reduce the tariffs back down to 10%. There's an additional 20% on China for fentanyl, like a fentanyl surcharge, if you will. But it seems to indicate to me that the administration is driving deals more than trying to drive excessive tariffs. So, I think we're comfortable predicting that by the time we get through the 90-day pause, the equipment in our industry won't be tariffed anywhere near those original high levies. They're not going to go away, but I don't think they're going to stick at those excessive levels. So that's where I think we are right now.
Okay. So do you see that causing any challenges for companies, especially around those costs and within the next 90 days?
Well, again, I'm gonna stick to the point that we really don't know anything yet of what it'll look like in 90 days. We have some hints that some of the tariffs will stay. We also have hints saying they're not going to be at the original levels. I think the two biggest impacts for our industry right now is uncertainty and the dynamic nature of what's going on, right? So these things sort of happened, I shouldn't, sort of in an unpredictable way, the way that they're going up and down. I mean, we always expected tariffs because, the current president's been talking about it for a year. Before he even came into office, he talked about it for years. So we expected some amount of tariffs, but this up and down, the lack of clarity drives a lot of activity around, what steps are prudent for us to take? How do we plan? What do we do? How might this affect supply flow when all these changes start to come about? And there, obviously the administration is keeping us busy doing analytics, and our executives are nervous. And but ultimately, the impact of one is still one of a wait and see. So I think it's more about delays, and we're not sure yet. And the industry sort of in a holding pattern to moving as fast as we'd like to move to get broadband out to the rural America.
Gotcha. So would you say it's like just kind of a waiting game right now?
Yeah, to some extent. Of course, manufacturers like us are doing things and geodiversifying, and we're moving things around, and we have plans to do that to reduce the tariffs. But that's not necessarily always for tariffs. We've been working under that for since the coronavirus pandemic. We've been working to move things around to make sure that we're resilient to anything that happens, including tariffs. But yeah, right now it's a bit of a wait and see. It's a slow roll until this 90-day pause is over.
So what can telecom companies do during this time to adapt to these changes?
Yeah, well, again, I think the last 7 years or so, we've seen a lot of changes, right, to building resilience in the supply chain disruptions. We had the initial tariff scheme under the Trump administration in 2018 against China. That triggered a massive move of equipment manufacturing out of China into Southeast Asia and Mexico and India, in some cases other locations. Then we had the unprecedented coronavirus pandemic, drove more geodiversity, more just-in-case inventory. Some clever manufacturing schemes were implemented. So a lot's changed, and we've learned how to be resilient in the face of disruption. I think, what we're seeing is more of the same, and perhaps a little bit more pressure to move faster and get closer and have a more persistent, like, regionalization options. So nearshoring, how can you build more in U.S. and in Mexico and Canada under USMCA? I think that's where it's driving, at least the manufacturing side of supporting the customers that are actually doing the telecom broadband expansions.
So Jerry, with all that you do know, I think the big question is, what is the long-term effect do you see these tariffs having on the industry?
I think there are a couple of scenarios to think about here. The trend towards nearshoring that started during the pandemic and even beforehand to some extent, it'll continue, and I think it will accelerate to some, to a large extent. I think the telecom industry will be building more volume in North America region for North America customers. That's kind of a global phenomenon towards regionalization. I think that'll happen in other, regions as well. So it'll, particularly, for things like telecom or other things that impact health or national security. But I think there's always a place for Southeast Asia countries to provide significant volume on lower cost appliances. So, it's optionality. I think we're just going to see more optionality. And the higher labor costs in North America, I think, will also drive some technological advancements in manufacturing and other areas to help stabilize these costs. So, yeah, my opinion is long term, it's going to be more regionalization, more here, but that will not exclude Southeast Asia and other countries as tariffs and other trade imbalances normalize.
Gotcha. So the big question, I'd love to hear your your thoughts on the BEAD program and how tariffs are affecting that rollout.
Yeah, that's a tough one because the BEAD program itself is going through a lot of dynamism, if you will. There's a lot of signals about the BEAD program itself out there, right? A lot of things that we talked about with the impact on the industry, they're still the same regardless of the final position on BEAD. So there will still be regionalization. BEAD may drive a little bit more of it even into the United States, but will continue to help drive nearshoring. The BEAD program itself, I don't, I mean, most of what I read and understand is I don't think it'll be substantially reduced or changed from at least from the original mission. Um, there are reports about a lot of the beads original mapping has changed since the initiation of the program. That might drive a little bit of a change in the way the funding is done and things like that. There's talk about reducing the fiber preference. That might present an opportunity for some satellite providers. But I think, let's face it, the industry players understand better than the federal government that the long-term best answer is fiber. And yeah, satellite has a place, but that, for really hard to reach and hard to service areas. But I don't think that it would have a major impact on fiber. Um, I think in some cases, it helps the American factories that we've set up be more competitive and maybe an impetus for driving better costs through automation. So, there's a chance to compete in a bigger way globally in telecom equipment after all this is over.
Which would be huge.
Would be huge, yeah.
Would be huge. Um, so with that, there are, of course, challenges. What challenges would you see that proposing for domestic fiber suppliers and broadband infrastructure?
Well, I think the main thing is, you know, is the fact that a lot of the states were already through the BEAD process. Louisiana, Delaware, and Nevada were like way up front, had early approvals, even under the Biden administration. And a lot of them had projects on their roadmaps and in their plans. We've done a lot of quoting as the other manufacturers have done so that the sub-grantees could put in their plans. But many of them are waiting for this final NTIA guidance. So yeah, it's a disruption, and I think there's still between the Fed and the states and the sub-grantees, they have a lot of work to do to get through the approval process. Uh,
Mhm.
and now you've seen that the Commerce Department recently delayed the final guidance from end of May to end of June or beginning of July. So there's like another month of delay here. But I think ultimately it's a disruption more related to the federal government's position on BEAD and less about the tariffs.
So again, just more waiting.
I think it's more waiting. I
Mhm.
think we've got another 60 days for that first 90-day term to go, to get by us, before we'll have a better feel for what both the BEAD is going to do and how the tariffs are going to play out.
Absolutely. And how would you say companies are working through these issues or through this waiting
You know, um, it may be less of an event than we think. I think one of the things that's important is that our customers, at least the customers that we're working with, are still out there trying to cover the underserved and unserved subscriber population. So I see a lot of still positive momentum forward. When this money, finally starts getting released by BEAD and Tribal and RDOF and RUS, all those different. There's like $100 billion in money. When that starts to come out, I think it'll just pick up the pace of it. I'm a little bit more worried about a big demand surge that is going to put pressure on supply, and that's one of our scenarios is planning for that demand surge to happen late this year, early next year, when some of these funds start becoming available and lots of states start getting approved at once. And that's our next scenario that we're working for.
So you guys are already preparing for that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We are putting supply in place to be ready for that.
Um, and what in your opinion can be done to reduce the impact of tariffs on BEAD?
Yeah, and I think tariffs for bead or tariffs for in any case, there are a few things that you can do. Number one, manufacturers and companies that are using manufacturers like Calix or others should make sure that we know that we're declaring the proper harmonized tariff schedule code. It's called an HTS code. So make sure that you're importing under the proper code so that you're not paying a tariff improperly. As funny as it may seem, many people don't do that, and they import under something that they're tariffed, and they could change the code legally and pay less. You also should make sure that you're paying for the minimum legally admissible cost that comes in, right? So if you're providing software and software is going on to the hardware, and then the hardware shipped out with the cost of that software, you really only have to pay for the hardware part. So you need to work with your trade compliance, lawyers and trade compliance third party companies to make sure that you're doing it properly. But you can really reduce the tariff, through just declaration process. Number two is I'm always negotiating with my supplier. So if a supplier is in a country that has a big tariff, we're going to work together on them doing things to reduce the cost. Can they reduce the labor? Can they automate? Can they use AI? What other things can they do to offset that cost? Because we don't want to see our customers pay any more for the equipment than they have to. So we're all working together to reduce those costs. You can reduce costs around, you can get full containers. It's all kinds of things you can optimize the supply chain and help, knock down any of that tariff impact for our ultimate customers.
That's huge. What advice do you have? I know you just gave us two um, really good points, but what advice do you have for these companies going forward? Just overall, what we've talked about, just in the waiting period and in the next steps, seeing what happens with BEAD and the tariffs. What is your best advice for companies dealing with these challenges?
Yeah, I think scenario planning is important. Understand, what the 2 or 3 scenarios that you think might happen are, and then prepare for those impacts. So if there is going to be a tariff, you may have to alter your plans a little bit, like where are you going to spend the money? How do you prioritize? Um, work with your suppliers. So, our customers will work with us, and, trying to minimize that impact. And of course, working with your manufacturers to move into lower tariff areas. We build in 9 different countries. We're an OEM that uses contract manufacturing, just like a lot of the folks that are providing services to these groups. So work with them to support the moves and help them just to become more competitive in your product.
And if you had to give the viewers one, if they take away one piece of advice from this podcast, what is that one piece of advice that you would suggest they take away?
I would say, it's like anything. Be prepared by not hiding from it, understanding that things might change, understanding that there are disruptions to come, and the more you can do to share your plans with your providers, your manufacturers, so your fiber companies, your engineering companies like Fibercom, making sure that you're sharing your plans and your scenarios around how your plans might change will make all of us better prepared to serve you when the dust starts to settle on some of these open questions.
Thank you. That's great. Jerry, I just want to say thank you so much for your insights and your knowledge, and sharing your experience with us. It has been such a pleasure to have you on Field Notes. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. This was such a pleasure to have Jerry. Honestly, a privilege. If you want to keep up with Field Notes, the infrastructure podcast, please subscribe to our channel. Connect with us on LinkedIn. That's it from the field. Stay grounded.
Thanks, Ed.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jerry. That was awesome. I honestly learned so much. I was really excited for this.
Good. I'm glad.